Because you already found out, what's the one thing you'll not mess around with? Inverted storm surge. This happens as a hurricane approaches a coastline. If you search, you'll find pictures of people walking around in shallow, empty stretches of beach. The storm gets close enough and the low pressure within the eye basically sucks up millions of gallons, pulling it away from shore. It can go for miles sometimes depending on the strength. Anyway, that water comes back, with prejudice. I grew up on the Alabama Gulf Coast, walked down the beach as a hurricane was approaching. I was in middle school and had no idea you couldn't see a hurricane the same way you can see a tornado. Anyway, the beach was drained entirely. Not knowing any better, I walked out to the end of the public fishing tier that would normally be about 8 to 9 feet deep. A few minutes passed and I was satisfied with this excursion, so I turned around. About 2/3 of the way back to the shore, I felt the ground rumble and I instinctively hauled as fast as I could. I'd say I finally got to about 20 feet from a jetty, rocks piled up to mitigate erosion, and got hit from behind by a wall of water. It actually carried me up and onto the very top of the jetty and slammed me down. I could feel that my sandals left my feet, and by pure luck, they floated up and gently settled right by my hands where I was holding onto the rocks. The water receded slightly, enough for me to get over the jetty and away from the beach. I was so embarrassed that I never told my mom about it and snuck into my house to get a shower and change. Fast forward to 2017 when I was living on the Florida Gulf Coast. A bunch of people walked down into Tampa Bay right as Hurricane Irma was rolling in. I legit got anxious watching the footage from a local TV station. Needless to say, I've never gone anywhere near the water ahead of a hurricane again. I've seen someone from a monsoon region say, if the water goes away, it's actually rearing back to kick you. I've never lived in such an area, but I will never forget that kind of advice. Story 2. Weatherman. Heard one on TV say, if you're within the sound of my voice, get to your tornado place now. I was a little jaded due to the many times I've heard this before. Still, I told my son to get in the hallway, then wait outside to get our beagles. And I saw the thing, a 400-meter wide F4 coming down our road. I got in the hallway with just a couple big couch cushions, pulled my son into my lap, hunched over him and held the pillows over us. He was unhurt, and I was in so much pain from that once all the pieces stopped moving that I didn't even realize I had 100 pieces of rock, splinters, and glass. Not a single thing even scratched my son. Had I gotten moving the moment he said that on the TV, we would have been sandwiched between 2 mattresses. We lived, both of us, both dogs and our cat. It seems like we were all huddled under those 2 cushions. The house? Nothing much left. Of a $290,000 house, it took $273,000 to rebuild it. The foundation and much of the framing were okay. This was the Enterprise AL tornado on March 1st, 2007. There were 8 students who passed away at the high school and one elderly woman just down the road from the school. 50 plus were injured from this in the area. Our daughter was at the school. It took 4 to 5 hours to find her. She was badly traumatized from the experience, but luckily only light injuries. This experience affected our family mentally for years, if not a lifetime. There are so many others who are as well. We did not have a shelter and did not put one in. Basements are not common for that area. I was stationed at Fort Rucker with 2 years to go until retirement. Tornadoes of that kind were not common to that area of the U.S. With climate change, they are now. Insurance paid for most of the repairs and replacement of our house and stuff. Non-recoverable depreciation took a big chunk out of our savings, though. This is something so few people realize will financially affect them in a large loss like this. We currently live in Florida. We've been through a few hurricanes turned tropical storms, but not a direct hit. We care for my mother-in-law, who is 83 and has dementia. Once she passes, we're moving, likely to Tennessee near our daughter. I would take a tornado over a hurricane. We were 18 miles west of the damage path of Hurricane Michael. What we saw of the damage from that during a recovery effort was staggering. I've been to war in the Middle East, and while those experiences helped me process that one, the sheer destruction visited upon Florida was mind-numbing. 2 years ago, we spent 8 hours in a strong tropical storm with 70 miles per hour winds and gusts to 90. The tornado lasted less than 2 minutes from when I first saw it to when I was stepping outside to survey the area. Except for the minor intrusion of water from our pool, we didn't have a single bit of flooding from the tornado. With my combat experience, very little scares me these days. There is surprisingly little fear during the tornado considering. Most of it came after a while trying to find our daughter. That tropical storm, the length of time, the wind, and the amount of rain, that was scary. My injuries were more extensive than just the shoulder and bruises. Due to a TBI from an explosion in Iraq, I suffered a secondary TBI from the tornado as well. My shoulder was put back in place by EMTs in the area, and surgery didn't happen until after we moved back in. Too much to do. The TBI wasn't recognized or treated until after we had moved back in. Honestly, I knew I had another TBI, but my family needed me to be strong for them, especially our kids. Once things settled down, I started getting regular headaches, and next thing you know, I'm at the Shepherd Center in Atlanta for 4 months, and also 2 months of hyperbaric treatments in New Orleans. We're all doing well these days, and when we're all together, we often talk about that day. It is as much a part of our family history as any other significant event. Story 3. Going too far in a very shallow sea area by the beach, especially if the beach has wet sand far into the land. When I was about 13, 165 centimeters or about 5'5" tall at the time, I went to the beach with my dad. It was a small cove by the Atlantic. The water was super shallow. I went like 100 meters, 330 feet about, in, and it was still at knee level. Then the tide came in. When the water got colder and came to my mid-thigh, I decided to head back. Before I had even crossed a quarter of the distance, the water was at my neck level and rising, waves crashing over my head. Each wave dragged me back into the sea with immense force as it receded. The tide also submerged about a third of the beach itself, making the way back even longer. My dad pulled me out, but it was scary as hell. I couldn't believe how quickly everything happened. I had nightmares about the sea rising and pulling me in for almost the next 10 years. They're gone now. Phew. My dad rushed to me way before the waves started crashing over. He had been keeping an eye on me and had waved me over, but when the water came up close, he realized I wasn't going to be fast enough and went in. By the time he reached me, the situation was as described. I wasn't drowning yet, but I could barely reach the sand bed with my toes while keeping my head above sea level and had no way to continue forward. I guess the ocean really wanted to give him a wake-up call, like literally. Story 4. Pigeons, or any birds nesting on or in your house. Had some pigeons living in my kitchen fan duct, the outside wall end. Never thought much of it. 11 months of agony followed. Being bitten by mysterious invisible insects at night during the evening. Itching when having dinner. Pinpricks halfway through the night. Shining lights at your legs, not seeing anything. You think you're going insane, but your partner also has it. We sprayed the whole house multiple times with pesticides, wiped the floors with permethrin. Afraid to bring the bugs to others, we stopped visiting people. Spent most of our day outside, wiped ourselves down with essential oil creams to have some sleep, reapply halfway through the night, made calls to all kinds of pest centers, institutes, and specialists. They all said I was imagining things or had fleas. In the end, I gave up the apartment and decided to sleep with a friend for a while, but I needed to clean myself and change clothing. Bought secondhand clothes and found an abandoned garden that only had cats in it. I threw my old clothes away, felt something itching on my legs, looked down and saw hundreds of fleas jumping up my legs. I sprayed them down with 99% alcohol I had with me to end whatever I had at home. Frustrated, I panicked away from that area. Goddamn cats were infested with fleas. The whole area was. My luck. At my friend's place, I still had midnight itches. I thought it was psychological. She had nothing, sprayed my bedding and myself with alcohol daily, tried to relax. One day, her black cat, sitting on my lap in the hot Spanish sun, scratched herself behind her ear. A bird mite walked over her head to my arm. I couldn't believe it. Finally, proof. I'm not insane. I caught it, made macro photos, sent them to the same experts that in the past had told me I was perhaps going crazy. Yes, that does look like a bird mite, which I was thinking and telling people for over a year. Lesson learned, if you have birds nesting in or in and around your house, they are not cute. Bird mites will haunt you for years. Nightmare stuff. Get rid of the nest and spray everything down with pure alcohol. Story 5. Piles of leaves in the fall. Don't touch them. You never know what's in there. I was helping my grandma rake her property. It's ginormous with so many huge trees, and before she just hired people to do it, it was an extended family weekend project every year. She lives at the base of a very steep cliff on a lakefront, and the job of the 3 youngest of the 6 cousins, which includes me, was to climb that cliff and then slide back down while spreading our arms and legs and taking as many leaves as possible with us to the bottom. A very effective method to get leaves down to the yard where they would be raked, and a good job for the ones that will bounce back the quickest from repeatedly sliding down a cliff at an angle that was just shy of being too steep to climb. Don't worry, it wasn't a rock surface, it was dirt, so it didn't hurt to slide down. On the way up the cliff, I was climbing on my hands and knees through leaves that were in a thick enough layer for my entire arms to be in them. At one point, I looked down and thousands of fire ants were climbing up my arms and legs and onto my body and scurrying across all the leaves I was in. Thousands. I was directly in the nest. I panicked and fell down the cliff about halfway up. An unplanned fall is much worse than calculated slide, let me tell you. I hit the ground at the bottom, screaming and literally coated in red ants head to toe. Actually coated. There were so damn many of them, it felt like a scene from a horror movie. My mom came running around the house and started yelling too while hitting me and trying to brush them off. She stood me up by the time my grandma came around the corner and saw the horror. When that proved unsuccessful, she grabbed my arm and took me to the gate of the marina next door and said, "Run!" So, panicking, crying, covered in red ants, I sprinted through the marina parking lot onto the dock and ran all the way to the end where no boats were in the way and jumped in the lake. The dock is very long, maybe like 80 feet, probably more. And so many people saw me run by at full speed in this state with absolutely not one out of context. Imagine hanging out on your boat at the local, very large and popular marina, just a regular weekend enjoying that crisp fall air, and all of a sudden, a sobbing 10-year-old covered in bugs runs by you at full speed and jumps in the freezing lake. It was fall in western New York. That lake was cold AF. They let me sit out the rest of Leaf Day and gave me so much Benadryl I don't really remember the next few days after that incident very clearly. I was never expected to come back for Leaf Day after that, and I did not. But I will never forget the time my grandma took my pants and hurt me with them while screaming. A cherished memory of bonding between a girl and her grandmother. Story 6. Australian zoanthid corals. They can be imported to the US without any regulations, and they shouldn't because they secrete palytoxin. Palytoxin attacks and destroys your potassium proteins, leading to muscle failure, cardiac arrest, and/or lung failure. It just attacks everything in your body, and anyone in the US, or at least Florida, can just get some to build up in a reef tank without any kind of warning or information. Myself and my 3 coworkers were relocating a reef tank, which is a delicate and multi-hour process across town, and the 2 workers that were more in the tank removing rocks, corals, and being almost shoulder deep in the water ended up getting large doses of palytoxin in their eyes and needing to go to the ER. Luckily, they had the chief of toxicology there who had just so happened to be studying that particular coral and toxin recently in Australia and had a bit of anti-venom left over to give them to save their eyes. The one of them was saved by having contact lenses, the other ended up with lacerations and needed a cornea transplant, and then it took them at least a month to recover. Myself and my coworker got extremely lucky we weren't exposed. Story 7. Don't trust a cop at his word, ever. Shut up, get a lawyer, and get everything in writing. A local cop who was famous for pulling people over for marked lanes violation. Basically, he would say you crossed the center line somewhere back there, and if you were intoxicated, you would get arrested. Arrested me and my friend and essentially planted evidence on me to get 2 arrests instead of 1. I never drank, so I would drive my intoxicated friends home. So I'm about to drop off one guy, get pulled over, yada yada yada. This scumbag cop tells my friend after realizing I'm not intoxicated, "If you have anything on you, just give it to me and you won't get into trouble." He gave up 2. Cop said, "One is yours, the other is," points at me, "yours." I got off with continued without a finding, but that screwed me up for years in job interviews and getting a license. Because I wasn't found innocent and my state is awful. I still got an LTC, but it was a serious hassle until they legalized it. Anyway, lessons learned, shut up, get a lawyer, period. P.S. I'm sure some of you are wondering why my friend trusted him, but the state police had a reputation back then of just dumping out grass if they found it, and that had happened to him once already. He didn't realize this local yokel was a famous criminal in uniform, and it happened too fast for me to warn him. Story 8. Tornadoes. I went through one particularly violent one when I was 9, at home alone with my younger brother and sister, 5 and 3, while my mom ran to the store. Thank God we lived in an apartment building with a gentleman who was both a good man and also willing to help 3 crying kids that he had never met. Our building was half destroyed. We were safe. I'll never forget walking outside and seeing my stepdad's car in a tree, literally mangled in a tree, and our couch sitting in the yard in front of the building. Looked like a war zone. I grew an insane anxiety about them, as well as a very high interest in learning about them. As I grew older, I had a very high interest in going tornado chasing in the Midwest through one of the chasing companies. I was around 25 years old, and I went with my buddy, as my wife at the time was not interested at all. We went out the first day and saw nothing but big storms. Second day, we saw a small tornado, which made me feel invincible as we chased it for about 5 to 10 minutes, right on its heels. It was maybe an EF1. On the third day, we saw probably 10 different tornadoes, one of which was very strong, so the group stayed back and photographed. As we photographed, another tornado developed behind us, a smaller one, but it bookended us and was very fast. We ended up in crosswinds in between the 2 storms and then the biggest hailstorm I've ever seen, nearly softball-sized hail. The group decided to get everyone to safety, and we ended up having an accident because of a flooded road, and 2 of the vans were heavily damaged. One took on a bunch of water and shorted something out electrical. We were next to a gas station, and the guides advised us to go inside and wait. Then they came running to the gas station, and the smaller tornadic storm produced another one, which sideswiped the gas station and tore the front doors off the hinges. We were all huddled in a back office, and then it was over. I went outside and just remember telling myself, "That's 2 you've lived through. That's enough." Trip was 4 days. I skipped the fourth and hung out with my wife while my buddy went. They were all safe, but it was a definitive moment for me where I knew I needed to stop tempting fate. These days, I'm the one who stays up all night if there's tornadoes in the area, and I'm glued to the TV like a hawk with our storm room ready in our basement with all the stuff I know we'd need. My family tells me they're comforted knowing how in tune I am with these storms, and it's honestly because I don't ever want to go through one again without being in a place I feel is safe and secure. I see these people in recent years outside filming them approaching their homes and have literally yelled at my screen, "Get inside!" People just have no grasp sometimes at how dangerous these things can be, and there ain't a chance in hell I'm going to risk anything for a few minutes of an awful, shaky video of one. Story 9. The basic human needs we forget or delay, each one comes with an expense. Even holding your whiz longer than a few hours damages your insides. Not eating enough so you get thinner or have no appetite, you slowly get weak. Everything you lack in your body is a different kind of pain and weakness. Not drinking enough water, everything in your body gets disrupted, headaches, infections, pains galore. Not sleeping enough, your body can't regenerate enough to keep you going and it just starts to show after a while. And if you're not even sleeping, mental health problems have no trouble showing up, especially hallucinations and paranoid tendencies. Not exercising, muscles slowly giving up on you and all kinds of mobility issues start showing up. Not taking enough mental breaks? Ooh, there are so many names for them now. Pick your poison. You wouldn't believe how the brain compensates for them and how illogical some results seem. Not feeling your emotions? That messes you up. Emotions don't fade away when you don't process them. They mess you up, persist for years and make your life harder in unimaginable ways. And lastly, you are not content with your life and want it to change, maybe hope for a miracle, that you are what needs to change. It's not all about faults or who is right or who is wrong. If you let people treat you badly, they will do it. If you don't stop people, they are going to use you. You need to choose and decide on your values and your rights, decide on boundaries and live according to them. Be realistic but kind to yourself. It's a lot of trial and error, but very necessary. The people that will be in your life will be. Let the rest go, however painful. It will make your life much better. Dehydration isn't just a headache. It's your body's way of telling you to water down your busy schedule. Story 10. Prescription medicine in Russia and a few other countries and banned in a lot of others. It was developed in Russia in the 60s as, I believe, a medicine that cosmonauts could take when they freaked out in space, but they were only allowed a single, small dose. Here in the US, it's sold as a quote-unquote supplement, and so is largely unregulated. It's very similar to GHB, a potent direct GABA agonist. In the small print, if the company that markets it in the US that you buy it from, very cheap, even includes small print, it says that physical dependence and tolerance develop quickly. By quickly, they mean take it 3-4 days in a row and you will experience fairly severe withdrawals. Take a moderate dose daily for 2 weeks and the withdrawals get so severe they can at least cause extreme discomfort, insomnia, paranoia, etc. It lasts a month to 6 months. Push it for a few months and the withdrawal can cause psychosis, long-term personality changes, seizures, and passing. Just because something is legal doesn't mean it isn't dangerous. I was reckless and was not right in the head for a year. This also brings to mind another medicine that is an extremely potent legal one, and to some extent, some that are both freely available in the US. I actually believe adults should be able to make their own choices, but with almost all dangerous substances being illegal in the US, it gives people the idea that if it is legal, it's safe. And if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 11. Magic mushrooms. It helps you process experiences from a different angle. It is an excellent therapeutic tool, especially when recovering from depression. It helped me. Mushrooms can be fun. I have felt such childlike joy in the woods, mountains, and on the coast. You internalize the world's vividness, feel bursting love for the spectacle of life, and all the curious things in it. It feels great to see friends smile back at you with familiar wrinkles you never noticed so clearly. The hallucinations are gentle and reassuring. The ground is breathing, tree bark swirls into interesting patterns, and the ocean's wave caps strike poses that hint of a sentient and playful sea god. But you must respect the mushroom. Take more than you are ready for, and it will, temporarily, undo you. It will be more than uncomfortable. You will shed layers like an onion until there's not much left. Then you will feel how cold and empty the void is. Nothing can't be truly experienced, but even getting close is pure psychic horror. And when you piece things back together as the lessons from its peak, the world's greed and cruelty reeks in you no matter how you mask it. And thoughts continue. We're all somewhat similar in our needs, but even the most inconsequential differences strain our empathy. We strive, and it is grotesque. Earth spins like a dumb rock. Its residents are finite, inconsequential, and alone. You are a victim of inanimate capriciousness from which you emerge and will someday be nullified. You're a character whose story is told through a first-person narrative in a book without an author that nobody else can read. There is no solid ground. The edges of reality are frayed. What now? Even hard trips end, usually with a deep sense of relief and exhaustion. You'll probably find meaning in it if you choose to, but the lesson remains: be mindful of the strength of your magic mushrooms and dose accordingly using an accurate scale. Story 12. When I was a kid, my older brother was in a motorcycle crash. A van delivering pizzas ran a stop sign. When my brother didn't have one and was thrown far but lived, doctors claimed it was only due to his helmet. 2 months in intensive care, 6 months bed rest in our living room, over 2 years of physical therapy, and a massive long drawn-out lawsuit against a large pizza chain that he eventually won. He had severe head trauma that is now showing its effects on his memory, a permanent hunch due to his spinal surgeries, and a huge scar. Bikers heard and donated samples and told stories of friends who didn't survive. Those long summer days at his bedside, just watching Friends reruns because it was the only thing he was interested in, and Pokemon because it was something he could tolerate for me, helping him clean himself and change his bandages while my parents were at work, and giving him his meds scarred me. Whenever I see a biker, I just have visions. I will never ride a motorcycle. He bought his second one a couple of years later, and I think it was the first passing of his marriage. Story 13. Do not drink and drive. My uncle got terminated by a man that was under the influence. Even if it's been almost 15 years, it has completely destroyed and demolished my family members. My uncle was so young. He was starting a new chapter in his life. He was so excited. I still have very vivid memories of him alive even though I was so young. I remember his funeral, open casket. He was so pale. It's crazy how you remember them, full of joy and happiness. And then in a split second, you see them gone, not able to communicate. Everything in that funeral home looks cold even if they tried making it a warm environment. I miss him so much. He would have been in his 40s. So please, please, please don't be under the influence and drive. Please call an Uber or taxi home. You don't want to be the reason someone's family doesn't have their loved one join them on Christmas or big celebrations. Plus, taking a taxi, an Uber, or Lyft home will save you hundreds of dollars of repairs, court, etc. Just please be responsible. Story 14. Mind-altering medicine. I was prescribed one after an accident with a car. One thing led to another, and I was injecting substances a decade later. I genuinely never thought that I could get used to it. Since I knew of the danger, I figured I was immune. It's honestly terrifying looking back on it now. Most of it is just a blur, including the line of taking the meds for pain or just to feel normal. If I didn't have my meds, I would go into withdrawals. It was like having the worst flu imaginable, along with massive depression, and your body feels like it was put through Hell Week training. And the worst part is, I wouldn't be able to sleep at all due to my body feeling restless and from retching. It was genuinely the worst period of my life. A lot of opportunities passed me by and a lot of life experiences. I essentially forced my life into a stasis for over a decade. I lost more friends than I made. I missed job offers that could have changed my life. I dated nothing but the wrong woman. I drained most of my money because of it. I thankfully never resorted to stealing, but I sold a lot of stuff that I wish I still had. My life is a lot better now, and I've been clean for over 6 years, and I don't even think about it anymore. Nor will I ever take them again, but that was my mess around and found out experience. Story 15. Speed bumps. I learned to drive in my mom's SUV. When I started college, my dad gave me his old beat-up minivan. So I'd only ever driven in slightly lifted cars with strong shocks. Whenever I needed to go past a speed bump in one of those, I'd slow down to about 10 miles an hour and just roll over them with a soft, gentle bounce. I was always a little put off while riding with a driver who would damn near come to a full stop when passing a speed bump. But in 2010, I was given a sedan, a 92 Honda Accord. Had it for a few months before I ever had to go over a speed bump. I dropped my sister off at her job one town over and took a shortcut back. Went into the path of a speed bump at maybe 8 or 9 miles per hour. Front of my car felt like it launched off the bump like I was driving a tricked-out LA lowrider or something. When the car came down, it smashed the exhaust pipe underneath right on the crest of the speed bump so hard it broke the exhaust pipe open. With an opening in the pipe between the engine in the front and the muffler near the back, that car roared like a dragon for like 3 years. I take speed bumps much more slowly now, regardless of what car I'm driving. Story 16. 2 things, gallstones and lack of informed consent. I had a debilitating pain in my back, chest, and ribs on and off for over a year. One day it got so bad and I ended up in the hospital for a week. Turns out it was gallstones. Pain was worse than the pain of giving birth to my son. I had my gallbladder removed, and since then I haven't had any issues. However, during my stay at the hospital, I was given a lot of pain medications. I did not know exactly what they were giving me since I couldn't think straight due to how much pain I was in. After surgery, the pain subsided significantly. I was sent home with medicine and no warning of the withdrawals I would experience the next day. I had horrible mood swings. I was depressed, completely irrational, very easily irritated, and had other side effects for about 48 hours. I wish they had told me after my surgery about the side effects of no longer being on whatever pain medication they gave me. I had no warning or information on what I was given or how it would affect me after I left the hospital. If you're not in the right headspace or able to ask the doctor questions about what they are doing, please make sure to have a trusted friend or family member be your advocate. You deserve to be informed. Story 17. Dating coworkers. Listen, I really don't mean to bring you a harsh reality, but if you are new at a workplace and there's that one person that is clearly flirting and sneaking glances, it is very likely that they do this with everyone and that they have a long track record. Trust me, I learned the hard way. I began working my first real adult job, spent a long period of my 20s inside because of school. Also, just generally don't leave my house. I would say I was naive. Anyway, I started the job and had a flirty coworker. This was at a respectable place that is part of every community, and I thought no way this other adult would be doing this just for giggles. Waited for a few months, finally caved and made a move. Nothing happened other than texting, but I came to find out this person had been sleeping with another coworker the entire time, had previously slept with the person that used to have my job, and after I found this all out, they've continued to flirt and try to hook up with anyone that even enters the workplace. I found all of this out without even asking anyone. People just share stories about the, quote, creep that works at this place whenever they hear you work there. This is a grown adult also, like a balding grown adult, and I'm an idiot for falling for it and believing all the BS they told me. So, yeah, if you have a flirty coworker at a new job, ask around how often they do this. Or better yet, don't even entertain them. Eventually, the horror stories will reach you without you looking for them. Story 18. Being buried. My grandma paid a guy to dredge sand out of the river next to where she lived into a big pile for us grandkids because she's freaking cool. Probably 10 feet tall at the very top, and it was cool. I got the bright idea to dig into it from the top straight down. I think it took me almost one day and part of another. And at the deepest point, it was deeper that I was tall. I actually had to dig out part of the wall so I could get in and out of it. I'm 5'2" for reference. So I'm crouched down inside this big hole. My brother was helping me. He was at the top with the rope and I had a bucket. I'd put sand in the bucket, he'd pull it up and dump it and send the bucket back down. I'm not sure what my end goal was. Well, anyway, my brother put his hand down on the edge in the wrong spot and sent a bunch of sand in on top of me. Remember, I was crouching so it covered my legs and lap. That should have been my clue to get out of there. Nope. Kept digging. A few minutes go by and it happens again. This time the sand went to about my chest. I thought to myself, okay, maybe I should try to get up and try to move. I can't. I'm completely immobile from the chest down. My brother calmly tells me he's going to get mom and runs to the house. I didn't know this at the time, but when he told mom what was going on, he was wide-eyed and scared. The way I was crouching, I was kind of half sitting on my left leg. Well, I started losing feeling in that leg. Also, I didn't realize at the time, but looking back at it now, it was getting increasingly difficult to breathe. Every time I exhaled, the sand was packing tighter and tighter around my chest. It took quite a bit of effort to get me unstuck. I don't know how long I was stuck, but it took my mom, grandpa, and brother to pull me out. By the time I got out, I had lost all feeling in my leg. I was very lucky. Story 19. The ocean. I went to Maui in 2018 and went to this beach called Breakneck Beach. It was called that because the waves break right on the beach. I thought nothing of it and went with my friend and our wives. When we got there, we heard a constant message that repeated every so often, warning about people getting paralyzed, but we outright ignored it. My friend and I jumped right in and the wives stayed out. The waves were rough and I did get pushed back a few times and fell hard on the beach, but nothing crazy. After a few goes, the waves got a bit more intense, but my confidence went up as I got used to it. We ended up going a bit farther out and we found out that we could just swim over the waves. This is when I found out. It was my friend, I, and two other random guys next to us. We saw this huge wave coming at us and we all just swam as hard as we could over it. It was exciting, and I could tell we all felt a sense of accomplishment for doing so. We all looked forward and saw an even larger wave coming at us even more quickly than the other. I remember one of the random guys saying, "I gotta get out of here." We all started swimming away and all got separated. I was wearing a shirt to help protect me from the sun that day. I was soon hit by the wave and I never felt so helpless. I was spinning so fast that my shirt was pulling off of me and the only thing I could do was grab onto it before I lost it. I felt like I was in a washing machine and kind of just loosened my body and accepted my fate, whatever it may be. I was just spinning around in the water, and all of a sudden, I landed on the beach on my feet with my shirt in my hand. The guy that said he had to get out of there was right next to me, and he just chuckled. We saw another wave about to hit the beach, and we hauled away from the water. My wife later told me that she lost sight of us, and all she saw was a wave hit the beach. To her, the random and I just appeared standing on the beach after the wave went back. He and I were lucky that we didn't complete another half rotation, or I might be paralyzed today. My friend showed up at another part of the beach and I did not go back in that day. Story 20. Trust an attorney to do his or her job? I was assigned to be personal representative in a probate case for my family as I was on maternity leave. I didn't know a lot about the law, so I did a ton of research. I discovered in Minnesota we can take $10,000 per family member out of the estate before any debtors can get their hands on it. My attorney had no idea. In another incident, my mother-in-law never received the invoice from my father-in-law's funeral, which costs are covered legally by the estate of the deceased. When she passed away 14 months later, we used the same mortuary and they discovered their mistake. My husband was handed the bill at her funeral. Tacky, right? They assumed automatically that we would blindly take the $9,000 out of her estate and pay it. The problem with that bill, though, is that it was only considered covered by his share of the estate while she was alive. She signed responsibility for it. We later found out she had asked for the bill several times, but they never followed up on it. When she passed away, though, that bill converted to an unsecured debt, payable out of her bank account, little to nothing in it since we are allowed the $10,000 for each of her 2 kids. The mortuary hired 3 attorneys to argue their case, and my attorney thought I was wrong, so he felt uncomfortable presenting it. The judge actually allowed me to present my case. I had all the legal documentation, including cited cases defending our position. The judge looked at my attorney and said, "I hope she's not paying you to do nothing." He was embarrassed. Then he turned to the other attorneys and said, "Am I right to assume there is 24 years education amongst you? And based on your ages, I'm betting there's about 60 years experience. Well, you just got schooled by, what do you do for a living? Stay-at-home mom? Yep, I won that one too." Story 21. German Customs adopted 3 children from Latvia 8 years ago, flight from Riga to Hamburg, Germany to Chicago. Step up, and the documents for me, my wife, 3 adopted kids, and our 2 bio kids. Names of Latvians on passports do not match the airline tickets because we were told to make them match what their names would be. But of course, their Latvian passports had their original names. Also, for the first 6 months, we were technically not their parents, just their guardians intending to be their parents. It is weird, don't ask. A German custom agent says a couple of words and another officer appears. Then a couple more words into the radio. 2 more officers appear and stand a ways back from the station. A line of 3 or 4 semicircle boxes, slightly elevated. When they received the docs, I had to then go stand behind the line. They're looking at the documents and talking. The 2 officers that just casually stood further back are looking straight at me and my family. They are armed, very openly, very obviously looking at us. Questions asked of me. Thankfully, they spoke English. More papers were provided. Yes, we gave them all the adoption proof, etc. They checked a few more things. The second officer dismissed the 2 armed guards and a few more words to the desk agent and left. We were free to go. Do not cross border/customs agents. I didn't, but I could see the writing on the wall. If I caused a problem, it was going to go very, very poorly for me. In the U.S., years before, a U.S. Customs dog hit on my bag. The officers asked to search my bag. I'm just in line and the beagle passed by and sat right down, turns out. We shouldn't have brought back the can of liver pate from Spain. Dog smelled it as foreign meat. We were allowed to keep it since canned products were allowed. Nevertheless, a rather tense but polite conversation with U.S. Customs was had in LaGuardia. Also, very clear that any attitude or problems would be poorly received. This was 2003. So soon after, I was subject to search 3 times, randomly chosen, sure. Slightly tan, bearded white guy. I would be pulled out to be searched while in the boarding line to the aircraft. Also, it was made very clear that causing a problem would be poorly received, again. So do not cross customs agents, just do not do it. Story 22. Don't follow the stream back to the car instead of the path. Cades Cove, TN, and the Smoky Mountains around October of '85. Abrams Falls. A friend and I made the hike and thought the stream ran parallel along the path back to the parking lot. It doesn't. It only appears to because there are two sections that bow out and away for a large section creating a foot. Luckily, we decided to cut back in the middle of one of those sections of land. This was already after rock jumping up the stream and getting wet in the mountain stream. Instead of wandering around in the forest, we went right back to the stream. Unfortunately, the sun was setting and we had to spend the night under the clear stars of October while totally soaked from the cold mountain stream water. The night was an experience for sure. We gathered leaves and piled them up on top of us to hold in heat, but shivered the night away as close as you could get to each other. A small animal ran across my chest in the night. It didn't even faze me. A large animal could be heard busting through branches and trees. The scariest part was that there was a searchlight that could be seen, and I naively thought someone was looking for us because we were quote-unquote missing. She had enough sense to say, "We don't say anything unless we hear our names being called out." No one was looking for us because we hadn't been missing for 24 hours. More likely, poachers were in the area illegally looking for deer to hunt. The next morning, we walked in the direction of where we thought the path should be again. This time it was there. We returned to the car to find a note that said, "Report to the ranger station. You have been reported missing." My family had a great laugh upon my return. Her family had a different reaction. Turns out her little brother had disappeared many years earlier in the same area and was never found. It was quite a well-known story, so of course the local newspaper, Knoxville News Sentinel, picked up with headlines on the front page saying, "Sister of boy never found gets lost in same area." Life is definitely stranger than fiction. And if you like these stories, fictional or not, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.